All right, everybody, welcome back to the study of the book of Galatians. This is lesson number 2. If you're joining us for the first time, if you didn't make it to lesson number 1, we are excited. And when I say we, it's me and the good looking guy, I guess above me or below. Either way, the dude with the hat on, Mr. Ray Luke, who I'm kind of the if you ever watch professional football, there's the analysis person that does all the concentrated, research and stuff like that. And then there's the guy that's just kind of like making the jokes and keeping everything moving. Well, I'm that guy, okay? Because I got a radio face and Ray has definitely got the video face. So we're welcoming you guys back. We're going to look at some interesting passages here, and I'm excited. I got the notes from Ray earlier and have been talking with him throughout the week, and I think it's going to be an exciting time. This week, as we said, be a little bit different than last week. Instead of waiting to the very end, if anybody has a question, Ray will either take a break and say, "Hey, if you have a question at this point," or if you'll just raise your hand, please. We'll I'll interject and quiet him down long enough for you to ask your questions, okay? And for those of you that are here for the recording, like last week, if you stick around after the recording goes off, I will be sharing another secret about Ray Luke that nobody else knows, okay? So you learned one last week, you got to keep up with them, okay? This week you're going to learn secret number 2 about Ray Luke, okay? So, Ray, I'm glad to have you back, man. How you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good, brother. Very glad to be here. Um, like we spoke, Mitch, last week. Um, we want to dedicate these lessons, okay, to anyone who needs prayer. Okay, we want to dedicate the lesson to all of Israel, the Jewish people, and all that they're going through. Okay, it's a war both in the land of Israel. Um, it's a war of the mind. It's a war, physical war as well. As Rabbi Nachman says, and is taught in Hasidic teachings that these wars that manifest in the physical, they begin first and foremost in the spiritual realms, in consciousness, in the mind, and then they end up manifesting um, into the physical. So we want to keep Israel in prayer. We want to show our support. Um, we want to pray for all those who may be ill and suffering. So if you guys have anyone in mind, make sure to send a little message in the chat so we can dedicate this to their memory and in prayer towards them. Okay, we want to make sure we do that. I also wanted to give a little feedback, a little reminder of what lesson 1 was about. What we did was just we gave a little overview of the book of Galatians. Okay, we talked about who Paul was. What is his background? Where does he come from? And we found out that Paul is a disciple of Gamaliel the elder, who is of the school of Hillel. This is a big deal. Okay, Gamaliel had, according to the Gemara, he had 70 disciples who learned Torah, strictly Torah. And he had 500 disciples who learned strictly Torah. And he had another 500 disciples who, besides learning Torah, they were also very learned in Greek wisdom, okay? The language and just how to speak speak the Gentile language and speak to the Gentiles. Because Greek wisdom, philosophy, etc., was the language of the time. And so those who had dealings with the government had to be about this type of work. And so it is a for sure thing that Paul was definitely one of the 500 disciples who studied, besides Torah, also studied Greek wisdom. We learned that the apostles, including Paul, if you miss this, it'll be pretty difficult to understand what is happening, not only in the New Testament, but especially in the books of the Apostle Paul. They were apocalypticists, okay? And what that means is that they either believed that the Messianic era or the redemption of God and everything that will come about that was at hand in their day. And for the apostles, literally, it was going to happen within their lifetimes. They had seen they had seen the main disciples had seen Yeshua die, okay, before their eyes, buried, and they also witnessed him to be resurrected. Okay, so in their eyes, and it's hard to compare any other disciple after them to the apostles, because for us it is a matter of emunah, right? It's a matter of belief, but for them, they saw it, they witnessed it. It's a little bit different. And so for them, the Messianic era was literally upon them. God has put his stamp of approval on Yeshua, and this changes everything. For the apostles, for the core 12, they were still working within, the dynamics and the understanding of the majority, which was, the redemption. I mean, even the Bible is this way. The whole of the Torah, the redemption starts first at home with the Jewish people. Okay, that's why it says to the Jew first, then to the Greeks. But for Jews, this little portion could be something that, not that is missed, but because of all the bad blood, all the bad history with the nations, it could be something that is hard to grasp or to foresee without destruction coming first. I don't think they may have believed that the Messiah was someone who can dominate the nations physically and then force them. It would be clear, first with force, and then it would be clear to all the nations that the God of the Jewish people is the one true God, and so everybody else would submit. But seeing it in a natural way, that the message would have to be preached to the non-Jews, and they would begin to come in. That was a pretty hard pill to swallow, especially at those days in that time. There were real pagans and things that we also cannot. There's nothing for us to compare. People who worship rocks and idols, and those things are long gone because of the history of what's happened in 2,000 years. So we're looking back. We're up ahead 2,000 years, disconnected from those times, and so it's kind of hard. The rabbis explain that idolatry already within the Second Temple times was already a thing. Like hardcore idolatry was something that was already kind of like lost. It had already lost its strength. This is why prophecy was a thing that was used to combat hardcore idolatry. And the Gemara says that if any of us lived in those times, if we lived in the times that there was idolatry, like in the days of the first temple, etc., everyone would have worshipped idols, because the way they explain it is that supernatural things would happen with the idols. So it was a real difficult things. And how was that combated? With nevuah, with prophecy. The gift of prophecy was something that combated the falsehood and that hardcore strength of idolatry that was extant at that time. And as the time kept rolling, and the message of the one true God through different vehicles, the vehicles of Christianity as it came about, Judaism in the places where they were exiled, and then later through Islam, it really snuffed out hardcore idolatry. There's no such thing like that anymore, not as it used to be. So we learned again that the apostles were apocalypticists. So was Paul. What is different with Paul is that he too believed that Jesus is the Messiah and that the Messianic era is upon us. But what does this mean in the larger scope of the Bible outside of the Jewish people? That the message of the one true God, they knew, according to the prophecies, the Messianic prophecies, that the message of God will go throughout all the world. And it says that 10 men from among the nations will hang on to the tzitzit of a Jew, and they'll say, take us with you, because we know that God is with you. And there's various passages in Isaiah and Jeremiah that talks about this time that all the nations will come to Jerusalem to worship the one true God in the holy temple. For it is called a house of worship for all nations, a house of prayer for all nations, right? So there's all these different prophecies that there were many rabbis who were aware of them. And so Paul is commissioned through heavenly revelation. This is mysticism, okay? This is what we know today as, Kabbalistic revelations, etc. That's how we know it today. Back then, it was part of the Maaseh Merkava, the workings of the chariot. And these are the ways these things were called. And so he had a revelation of Jesus, the Messiah, who commissioned him to go on to the Gentiles. This is all through the foreknowledge and divine providence of the Creator. And because these things happened after Jesus died, he didn't commission himself to go out to the Gentiles. You know, this happened through another religious Jew, through a rabbi from the house of Hillel. And he was used because of his background to go out to the Gentiles. And there was already a big work by divine providence before the apostles, before Jesus, before Paul. It is said that 25%, maybe even more of the Roman Empire, many of them had already converted to Judaism, converted and became Jewish. So there was something big that was already going on. It's kind of grueling. And so these are all the things that we discussed this week. This second lesson that we're going to speak about today, we're going to talk about, Galatians, okay? We're still in kind of, it's just a topical study. So we're going to talk about who are the influencers. This is a big deal. This is something that we still see today. It was a big deal in the first century. It's been a big deal throughout the history, and still to our very day, it's a big deal. And so we want to get right into it. Up to right now, if anyone has any questions or anything like that, you feel free to ask, or any comment, you're good to go.
Ray, if you'll
go forward.
Ray, if you'll pull that scripture slide up, please,
Yep.
and then I'll.
Yep.
I just want to add to Ray that one of the things that I mentioned last week that really kind of opened up my eyes to the environment during that time was the pressure to convert, and to those that Paul was speaking to, and was trying to give a message of, okay, there is an alternative, okay, and what that meant. But there was heavy within Rome and outside the areas. There was heavy influence from those that were either proselytes or full converted, or full Jews. The pressure back to that third party to make the trip over was heavy. They'd be looked down upon a lot of times. There'd be a lot of pressure on their families and things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and open up, Ray, if that's okay with you, with Galatians 1.
The pressure, Mitch, the pressure was something that I don't think we can, I think it's hard for us to be able to, connect to today, because we're not being persecuted for our faith as of yet. I mean, there's been times in the past, but think about it like this. Judaism had religious exemption by Rome, okay? So it was okay. You were Jewish and you could strictly just worship your God. You could worship the God of Israel, okay? But you could not be a Gentile and strictly only worship the God of Israel. You would have to make full conversion. That's fine. You made full conversion, you would have that religious exemption. But you couldn't be like, oh, well, I'm a Roman right. Gentile, and I only believe in the God of Israel. So I am not going to participate in the imperial cult. Yeah. This was like regular weekly things that happened. Okay. Yeah. This is why the 4 prohibitions that the apostles give in Acts 15, they're against the Roman imperial cult. This is so that these Gentiles can have some type of relationship with the one true God. In order to have a relationship with the one true God, you had to separate from some big norms that were all connected to Avodah Zarah. Okay, foreign worship, idolatry. It had to do with, make sure you didn't eat anything from the imperial cult, things strangled, okay? And these things were sacrificed to the gods. Whether the Gentiles believed in the gods or not, it doesn't matter. It was idolatry. Be careful with, in those type of parties and in those festivals, there was prostitution, okay, going on everywhere. And it was part of this imperial cult.
Right.
It was 4 prohibitions all against idolatry,
so
that you could have some type of relationship with the one true God. This was a beginning step. This was not the whole of your obligation, but this was a beginning step for you to come in. This was not easy. Right. It was so much easier for the Gentiles to convert. It's easier on the family. because you could get in trouble now with Rome if you stayed as a Gentile and tried to keep the teachings of, let's say Paul was your rabbi and you was gonna stay this way and try to keep away from the imperial cult. That was going to be difficult, very difficult.
Yeah, and right before I left Christianity, and in that going through that circle, the only thing I had to compare to at that point was fire and brimstone. It's like you, you either do it, you say it, and you're saved away from hell, or that's it, you're gone. And so that's the only thing. And there were a lot of, as well as I do, coming out of that environment, there was just, you had the 50s and the 60s, and then on into the 70s, the evangelical movement was very strong in the fear gospel. And that's what I used to call it, was that fear gospel. So, but anyway, I'm going to hit the Galatians 1:6-8 real quick here. It says, I am astonished that you are so quickly deserting him who called you in the grace of Messiah and are turning to a different gospel. Not that there is another one, but there are some who trouble you and want to distort the gospel of Messiah. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let him be accursed.
Mm. That's tough, man. With everything we know now, right? There's something going on in this Galatian community that Paul has been preaching to. And so he gets word that there are some who are preaching a different gospel than a different good news that he had been preaching to these non-Jews. They were more than likely God-fearers. They had some connection to the God of Israel, to the Torah, etc. Been going to synagogue, been getting closer. So he had also preached to them the good news that, hey, Messiah's here. Have you not heard of the tidings of what happened with Yeshua of Nazareth? So he had preached to him all these things. He died, he was resurrected, he appeared to me and to many of his core disciples. Maybe some of these Gentiles were acquainted with what happened as well. So now here comes some folks that we're going to talk about, that we spoke about it last week a little bit too. These influencers, they're not non-believers or not non-followers of Yeshua or non-disciples. These people are disciples. These are followers of Yeshua. Okay. These are just scholarly terms that are used to kind of pinpoint who these people are. They are Jewish. Okay. And many, like Mark Nanos, a few different scholars, think more than likely these guys were converts themselves. I've been around for a while, and especially in these circles, and I have seen that especially newly converts and converts who become Jewish are some of the most zealous people for Torah Judaism, especially for getting others to convert. And so it is believed that these people were proselytes, converts themselves. And the different gospel that's being preached is basically this, and we'll touch it at another lesson, but basically it's this. It was not good enough. This is something that is known within a battle within the schools of Shammai. They also did not believe that a Gentile, just by being Gentile, and it didn't matter if he believed in the God of Israel, okay? They thought that they were so entrenched in Gentile ways, which was engulfed in idolatry and pagan ways, you couldn't trust them. They were not good enough as non-Jews to make it to the world to come. They could not have a share in the world to come. Okay, you could hear these comments, you could hear these types of discussions. They're in the Gemara, they're in the Talmud. Mainly from the school of Shammai. Now, until recently, I thought that Hillel believed and taught that if you were a non-Jew and you were righteous, that you could have a share in the world to come. That this comes from Hillel himself. But I need to do more research, but as I am understanding, he has never quoted as saying this himself. He also believes, and if you know the very classic story in the Talmud of the convert that comes to Shammai, and he asks him to convert him while standing on one leg, and Shammai chases him away with the measuring reed, right? He's like, teach you the whole Torah while I'm standing on one leg, but meaning like, give me the basics, you know? He didn't want to. He didn't want to hear all that much stuff. He chased him away. Shammai was not going to waste his time with him. But remember, what the convert says is, if you teach me the whole Torah on one foot, I'll convert. He goes to Hillel and asks him the same thing. If you teach me the whole Torah while standing on one foot, I'll convert. Not that I'll stay a non-Jew. Okay? And so Hillel does. Hillel, he teaches them a basic, which is, it's pretty classic. Yeshua teaches the same thing, right? Whatever you don't want a fellow to, you don't want him to do to you, don't do it to others. This is the whole Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn it. So this is the main deal. The main thrust of this different gospel was being preached by these so-called influencers was, it's not okay for you to stay a Gentile. At some point, sooner or later, you guys are going to have to get circumcised, which is key for saying you convert and become fully Jewish and integrated to the Jewish community. But here's the problem. This is the issue we talked about last week. If everyone converts, Mitch, what do we have? A whole world full of Jews. Everyone's Jewish. How does the prophecy, how does the promise, the blessing that God gave to Abraham, that through his seed, okay, whether it's Messiah or Israel, it's both, would be a blessing to all nations? How could that come about if there are not other nations? And there's plenty of prophecies that speak about the end of times. There's going to be all nations that come to the one true God.
See, Ray, and that's a great point, because the people of the nations, the Jews were given a tremendous responsibility, but that responsibility had to go on some type of vehicle to get from their close-knit community to be an example to Gentiles, to be an example to those outside the gates, okay, so to speak. And that's different. That's different than in the Christian world, where it's go and make disciples. Go and make disciples look like this church looks, or go and make disciples that say this certain prayer and speak a certain way about Yeshua. But it had to have been quite a charge for the people of that time to take that charge and try to understand what that looked like as they began to share or began to talk about not just the ramifications of Torah, and not just understanding Torah, but what went with it in all aspects. And that was a big responsibility. That was a that was a tremendous bag to carry on their shoulders to make that profitable, or not profitable, but to make it understood, to make it to get it across where the ears would begin to listen. But then you got ears out there that are beginning to listen, and they're going to come up with their own their own end of the book, or their own end of the tale, or their own end of the story. And so that's how and that's why
And don't get me wrong,
that's why Paul got
this
notified, hey, look, something's happening here in Galatia, you need to address. So
yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, we talk about it, 2,000 years removed, and all of history that has happened between that. It wasn't an easy situation. It wasn't an easy situation for the Jewish community neither. Remember, they're chosen people, right? They're chosen people. God has chosen the Jewish people to be the receptacle and the vehicle through which the knowledge and revelation of the one true God comes into the world. This is not an easy task. especially they're a minority people, right? And they must stay this way because they're a priest. They're a priestly nation.
Hey, Ray. Hey,
Yes.
Ray. Should I go somewhere else, Mitch?
Yeah. Come through these speakers.
Sorry, guys. I'm with you.
For those of you who don't know, Diana is my wife, and she's like
Sorry.
right
But-
under the same roof here. So
I found it interesting, and this week's Parsha reading was about Jacob and Esau.
Okay.
And then you trace that Esau is actually given a blessing as well, and that and then God told the Jewish people and told Jacob, you're going to be protected as well. And Esau is seen as the father of the Gentiles, tracing to Rome. And you have Ishmael, who was also given by God that he was going to be a father of nations, and that was the Muslim, tracing back. And yet God gave specific instructions of protection to the Edomites, which trace to Esau, which lead to Rome. And so even though they're not Jewish, God recognized these two important forefathers of nations that he also recognized of wanting to give protection to them as well. So I find it interesting, even though they're not Jewish, even though they trace back to Abraham, that protection is still there by God. And I think the Jewish people realize that, but it's how to figure out how to bring those three groups together. And we haven't quite figured that out, obviously, with today's current times. And then there was pressure, I guess, on some of the people that were, following Jesus, even from the Jewish leaders, because they were showing up in their synagogues, and then they were afraid Rome was going to take notice and say, you have all these people that aren't Jewish in your synagogues. We're going to take away that exemption from you because you're allowing all these people in. So now the Jewish leaders also feel the pressure to get these people converted to Judaism, or Rome is going to, which they did, but Rome was going to, because Caligula was going to try to set up his own with the worship of Caesar. He's going to set up a statue in the synagogues, and he died before he ever been able to do that. But the leaders are like, oh my gosh, they're going to try to come after us. So there's a lot going on, but I found that interesting with the Parcha portion this past week was all about Jacob and Esau, but the protection given to Esau and the blessing given to Esau, even though he's not Jewish. So
wow, amazing insights. I mean, there's there's so much to say. That's so true. All of it is true. And what's really interesting is like when they're both in the womb, it says that they're, the prophecy says that there are two nations in the stomach. There was Jacob and Esau. They're twins, and many don't know this, but Esau is also Jewish. Okay, he might have intermarried, which he did. He married one of the children of Ishmael, and there's that connection there. One of his daughters, and so, and yes, these nations are still here to this day through the cultural or spiritual ramifications that they have, right? We know that Esau is called Edom because some of his descendants went into Rome, intermarried, etc., and they made all that territory there. And then what is the remnants? What is left from that great empire of Rome? It's the culture. It is the religion which was left, which is Christianity. Okay, this is in all Western cultures. Just like you cannot pinpoint the people of Ishmael. Ishmael is not necessarily Arabs, but for the most part, all Arabs are what? Muslims, right? And so that is the way that we could still pinpoint who Ishmael is. They're still here today. And there are promises to each, but they have to get in line. But now check this out. What is the thing that connects all three? What is the one thing that connects all three? Can anyone tell me? What is the thing that connects all three? Mike?
Gotta be Abraham.
Is,
Can I just say something?
what?
real-
yes,
Yeah,
Laura.
go ahead,
Yes,
Laura.
please.
Okay, when she was talking, when Diana was talking, I realized that the prophecy in the Parsha this week says that eventually that the older is going to serve the younger. And so Christianity is going to have to come under Judaism, but they're still in idolatry because they made Yeshua God.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
it all ties in together.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely, definitely. Mike, I think you had
Yeah.
something to say. Do you know what ties them all together?
Yeah, I was gonna answer the same thing and say Abraham.
Okay, Abraham. So yes, true. Abraham is connected to, but why is Abraham connected to Esau, which is Rome, which is Christianity? Why is Abraham necessarily connected to all three? Is it through Abraham himself?
No, I wouldn't say
It's through who?
Jacob.
It's through one of his descendants. It's through one of Abraham's descendants that all three are connected, and that's Yeshua of Nazareth.
Yeah.
He is the one Jew whom all the world has come to know. See, the nations know Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not necessarily because of Abraham, because of one of his descendants, who is Jesus.
Right.
See, Christianity is bigger than Islam, and they were first. They were able to conquer the world and spread Christianity everywhere. With the banner of who? Holding up the banner of the cross, which is a picture of Jesus. And so the nations began to learn about the entire Torah because of this Jew, whom who became idolized in their eyes. Because even in the womb, okay, it is said that when she went through the house of idol worship, her belly kicked. That was Esau. And when she went through a house of worship, a Beit Midrash, a house of learning Torah, the belly kicked. That was Yaakov. That was Jacob. Okay? The one connection to all three, whether they like him or not, two of them like him. One of them is like, he's brought us nothing but problems, is Yeshua of Nazareth. He's the one connector. He's according to Time Magazine, according to the majority of big historians, Yeshua of Nazareth is the most influential person and historical figure of all time. Call it what you want. People will say, well, Christianity conquered with the sword. You know, this is why I don't care. You know what the Rambam says? The Rambam says, not that I don't care. I mean, this is true, but the Rambam says that the Messianic times will come through a natural means. That means a natural means is there's going to be error. There's going to make big mistakes. There's going to be a lot of sin. There's going to be some things that go well, but it's a natural means. If it's supernatural, then everything would have went perfect.
Good, Ray.
But until this
Ray,
still see yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Soteria has a question. I mean, had her hand up for a while there. She actually did it the right way. She raised her hand instead of just jumping right in. So Soteria, go for it.
Hey, I just simply wanted to add that in the Call of Torah, in the commentary of this week's Parsha, it says that even geographically, if you look at Italy and you look at Israel looks like a hand, and Italy looks like a boot. So it's as if Jacob is holding out his hand to the to Italy, to Rome, to Esau.
That's incredible. And Jacob has his foot up, and Esau has his foot up.
You're right.
Like, no, we're gonna stomp you out. I mean, that's the same thing that happened on the journey. It says that Esau came with 400 men of war against Jacob, and he had to make provisions, you know, different types of provisions. He sent gifts, you know, he prayed, he prayed, he sent gifts, and at the end, he split the camp, and he was ready for war too.
Yes.
Okay, so Mike.
Yeah, I was just gonna say back to what we were talking, like, you know, but like according to Paul and him going through Galatians and talking to all the Gentiles, like, you know, today we have scripture, we have copies of, you know, the Bible and the Tanakh, and they're everywhere. You know, we all got a copy of it. Okay, so you have the Galatians back then. What do you think was drawing everybody to Paul's message at that time? That was, you know, I hate to say it like this, but you know, what made Judaism attractive to people. Like today, you know, we have it like, you know, in Christianity, you know, you say this prayer and, you know, you get saved. You know, we got the big church, mega church, you know, but it's like what was going on back then that would draw people to Paul's message, and then also maybe to like how we said in the scripture that who led you away so quickly. So you know,
Great.
Those are great points.
Great question there,
Yeah.
Michael. Go ahead.
Great points. I think it's all connected to what I said a little earlier. The rabbis say that as the generations, you know, come closer to our times right now, they dwindle. They get weaker and weaker. The generations get weaker, and in terms of strength of spirituality, the generations of past may not have known everything we know today, but neither did they need it. Prophecy was dwindling, so the power of nevuah, okay, of prophecy, and a weaker level of nevuah of prophecy, like one of the prophets, is called Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit. We hear about it in the New Testament a lot. It's a lower level of prophecy, and they had that. There was a working and stirring of the Spirit, maybe the likes of what we may not know today. We may not have no understanding of that, because the rabbis, the sages, Chazal, they speak about it in the Gemara. They say that a Talmid Chacham, that is a Torah scholar, listen, he's greater than a prophet. And you may ask yourself, how can that be? In reality, on a strict level, he actually is not. But you have to understand why they're saying that. The why is that a Talmid Chacham, a person who actually is learned in Torah, doesn't need to be influenced by heaven. He doesn't need prophecy. He knows as much as the one who kind of like intuitively through prophecy knows God, because he is learned about God and his ways. Do you see what I'm saying? So as the workings of prophecy and Ruach HaKodesh kind of dwindled among the world, what rose was Torah knowledge, as the Jews were exiled everywhere. It says, why were the Jews exiled to all the four corners of the world? Only in order to make converts, raise the sparks amongst the nations. And by that time, Christianity had already spread, and they were doing the same, even in an erroneous manner. Everyone, what is a church? Everywhere you see a church, I go out on my block and I'll see 4 or 5 churches, okay? And they all bow to a Jewish rabbi, whether they know this or not. And you go in there, and it is a house of study. They may not know this. They are going to study of the one true God. They have Bibles upon Bibles upon Bibles in there. So I think this is the reasons why these things have happened. So that what? As the prophet Isaiah said, so that everyone in the world may know God. How would they know God? If they never heard of him, if they never studied his word. There's only one way. It says, how can they know if there's not a preacher who's sent and sent to know the word of God? Right? This is what has happened, man. We live in those times that any one of us and any one of you, which I am aware of, knows about God in ways that the past generations could not even dream of. We may be lower on some type of spiritual level, but in regards to knowledge, we're on a very, very high level. Okay. Anybody else got a comment or something before?
Yeah,
I want to get through some of the... Go ahead.
I just wondered, do we know what percentage, of Gentiles became believers? Like, was it a big percent, or was it just a small remnant?
Oh,
at that
man,
time?
believers in Yeshua?
Yeah, at that time, from the Gentiles.
Oh, man, it was if you read the historical sources, right, church history, the Christians became a big, big thorn on the back of Rome. We know that the first thing that they began to do, Rome, the empire, was to start killing them all. They didn't know what to do with them. And the more they killed them, the more they multiplied. They were having shows with them. They would take them to the Colosseums. They were feeding them to the lions. They were feeding them to the wolves. They were doing all kinds of things. And these people were literally dying in their faith. I mean, there's whole books on these things.
Right, at this time though, when Galatians was written,
Oh, no,
that's
no,
what
no.
I'm, that's
In
my
Galatians,
question, yeah.
Yeah.
okay, so at that time, it was still a slow process, but a lot of people were coming to believe.
Hmm.
A lot of non-Jews were coming to believe. And so as Diana was saying earlier, this was becoming a problem. It was becoming a problem for Jewish leadership. So they wanted to get them out of the synagogues. They wanted to kick them out. And that kicking out did not completely happen till after the destruction of the temple. After the destruction of the temple and the Kopha revolt, then there was a nice line in the sand that they drew, and that's it. You know, they kicked all believers in Yeshua out, both Jew and Gentile. The Gentiles also began to separate. The Gentile believers began to separate with time from the Jewish believers. Also, it began to be a no man's land, and Jewish believers began to speak bad about non-Jewish believers, and vice versa. And Gentile believers began to speak bad about Jewish believers and the non-believers. It got ugly, man, and it got ugly quick. But yeah, a lot of Gentiles in these early stages of Paul, a lot of Gentiles began to come in, and this was the main reason why Paul caught so much slack, so much. He caught hail from the Jewish community, because how is the synagogue going to be overrun by Gentiles? If there's 15 Jews in the synagogue and now there's 23 non-Jews trying to attend, that's a problem. We're not so chosen no more, especially if now we have some smart Jew here saying that it doesn't matter if you're Jewish or non-Jewish. What matters is if you obey God's will. And you know, it was a problem because not all the rabbis agreed with Paul. I mean, they weren't believers themselves in Yeshua. They were like, you know, the Messiah still hasn't come. They still kind of tolerated each other at this time, but what they were not going to tolerate was such a big group of Gentiles coming in. This was too much of a problem for the reasons that we had already gone over. It could get them in trouble with Rome. Okay.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
Yep. So the influencers, okay, really quick. They were Jewish followers and disciples of Yeshua. They were teachers of Torah. They're within the Galatian community, and they are influencing these God-fearers to make full conversion and become Jewish. Someone who is not a follower of Yeshua does not want to distort the gospel of Messiah. Instead, he would rather refute and repudiate it. This is a clear sign that they were believers. Usually, some of the most zealous Jews for wanting others to convert are those who are themselves converts. This is true. I've seen it in myself and many of the groups that I walk in. Okay? Nothing wrong with conversion. I'll be the first one to applaud and back someone who wants to convert. Remember, we lived 2,000 years separated from the times of Paul and the specific communities that he was speaking to. He had no idea that 2,000 years was going to pass. So I'm the first one to say, if you're a unique situation, you and your family, or maybe you by yourself, and you want to convert, there are a lot of benefits in converting. But the only thing that I am in full agreement with Paul is, it cannot be because you think you have a better chance at receiving a share in the world to come because you're Jewish than if you were a non-Jew, or that I'm going to convert so that I can have a share in the world to come. I think this is the main thrust of Paul, and this is what he was combating. It's the same thing I kind of stand on, and I've heard it even to this day. They'll tell somebody, well, you cannot worship God, and you can't really serve God correctly if you're not Jewish anyways. You know, you can't keep the full Torah. You can't, it's just convert. It's basically saying, you can't. I mean, I have even heard for certain people, this is how I was made aware of certain sources, that no, the sages actually say that it's there. It's an opinion. It's there that the non-Jewish world has no share in the world to come. They go back and forth. Then there's another rabbi that comes in and he says, well, it's actually what the passage is saying is that those who act in the manner of Esau, they have no share in the world to come. So if you act like Esau, you will have no. So there's this back and forth, but there's a Gemara that says that the non-Jewish world is basically fated to not have a share, and so this can be kind of complicated. And then the main message of the influencers towards the Gentile God-fearers was that it was not enough for them to just believe in the one God of Israel and his Messiah. No, they needed to fully convert in order to have a share in Olam Haba, that's the world to come. That is in line with what we know from the school of Shammai, who believed the Gentiles could not have a share in the world to come unless they became Jewish and kept Torah fully. Okay. Again, because Paul was an apocalypticist, he wasn't giving them, like, you don't have this rundown of all the commandments that they're supposed to keep. There is an inside conversation that we have no details to in the New Testament. There's a lot of details that are just not there. So people who think that all they need is the New Testament or the Bible in general, without the tradition, the Masorah, you're in a lot of problems. You got a lot of problems because you're going to have to make it up as you go. So actually, you don't believe in sola scriptura, only the Bible. You actually believe in your own tradition and understanding of the Bible. So because he was an apocalypticist, the main thing was stay away from idolatry, believe in the one God of Israel, his Messiah is here. Everything else will kind of be told to you. You know, you go to the synagogue, you learn here and there, you kind of know the main things you got to stay away from, some of the core things you can do. But clearly throughout all the letters of Paul, you hear him talking about, don't be a wicked person. Don't be someone who, and he names different sins. If he's naming different sins, these are things that you're not supposed to be doing. And if he names certain positive commandments, these are the things that you're supposed to be doing. This is how we know that there's obligations there. Okay?
Hey, Ray.
Yep.
Just real quickly, in the chat box, there was a comment made about, I don't think the synagogues tossed out the Jewish Christians. Paul had no trouble going into the synagogues and preaching. What are your thoughts on what that may have looked like, as far as, I mean, I know what it would look like today, because I like you, I have had friends that have converted fully, and I can't access that synagogue. I can't access, a lot of what's going on within there. But, what do you think if there were 12 Jews in there in this gathering, synagogue or, whatever, and then 26 non-Jews or Gentiles come in and began to want to learn, because today they call it polluting. If Gentiles go into the synagogue, they're in fear of the Torah being polluted or the environment being polluted. But what do you think it would have been like for Paul to access into those areas? It's one thing for him to write a letter, but it's a whole nother thing if he went in and began discussing the thoughts as well. In these
early times, still, like in the days of the Galatians is the earliest book of the New Testament, by the way. It's written earlier even than the Gospels. Okay. The New Testament is not in chronological order. Neither is really the Torah in general. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, the communities that were having these non-Jews coming in, it's kind of very similar to what I see today. At this time, they were still being tolerated. They could be tolerated, and even arguments can ensue. That's cool, okay? But there was not this just ban that you couldn't be in there. Yes, Paul was in there. Clearly, we'd see it. We see it in the New Testament. He was in there, and he was preaching his deal. And very much similar to, like, for example, I don't ever talk about Jesus when I go to synagogue, ever. I go there to worship God, to daven, to pray, and to share with unity, whatever it is, Torah study, whatever. But a lot of times, my Jewish friends there, they'll bring up Jesus. and they'll talk about him. And so I'll engage, right? I'll engage and say a couple things here and there, not too much, and we go back and forth. We'll go back and forth, all of us. We'll go back and forth. They'll say something, I'll say something, and it's cool. A lot of positive things out here. You'll hear some things that may not be that positive, but there's a dialogue, there's a conversation, and it's not like, I don't want to talk about it, get out. That's not going on. So it's very similar back then too. Okay. And if people continue to show up, I'm sure that there was more. Maybe there was more to do. For sure, you had prayer, you had the readings of the Torah. You learned. You learned about our heroes. You learned about spirituality. You learned about how to serve God. To what extent, not sure. I kind of know how a regular synagogue services ran, so something very similar. But at that time, in that early time, it was still being tolerated. The doors were not closed yet. So yeah. At those times, Paul was in there and he was preaching. There was no problems, and all the apostles were too. There was nowhere else to go. There was no such thing as a Christian church. There was no such thing. There's no such thing as Christians. That is a scholarly term that's used for Jewish believers or a believer in Yeshua. There was no such thing as that yet. That didn't come out to much later. Much later. So yeah, that's what was going on there.
Well, Lori made a great point just now. She goes, they may have been humble and not arguing like Christians are today.
Argumentative. Yeah.
Yes. Because it is extreme. I mean, the arguments within the denominations and within the one corner Baptist church and the other corner Baptist church is just ridiculous. So it's just,
I actually don't see at that time, I don't see Gentiles actually engaging the conversation. I myself personally don't see that, because as Mike had pointed out, every non-Jew didn't have a Bible. How'd you learn about the Torah? You had to go to the synagogue. You had to hear it read. Okay? So it wasn't like, I don't think that at this time you had many Gentiles who were actually scholars in the Torah. So I don't think there was nothing to debate. Who was debating? Probably Paul. He was going back and forth with other rabbis because they really actually did know the Torah. Whatever. And you see this kind of stuff till today about any subject. This is a very normal Jewish thing and Torah thing to do. Discuss and go back and forth, as long as for the sake of heaven, it's normal. I mean, I do it with my friends all the time. We could disagree hard, but as long as we both trying to seek out and search the truth, we'll get there, whether it's through your way or my way or a third party's way, because it's all for the sake of heaven. Right? Oops. I see a lot of different comments.
And the reason for the upper room was because the disciples were actually hiding from the Romans that were searching them. They weren't, because a lot of people believe they were hiding from the Jews.
No, they were hiding from the Romans.
Right. But there's this misconception that they were hiding from the Jews, and that's absolutely wrong.
Yes. The Romans were looking for anyone. Remember, if you claim to follow a so-called Messiah, that was a problem. You know what a Messiah means? He's the king of Israel. If you're the king of Israel, then you're not subject to Rome. That's treason. Why do you think they killed him? That was the charge against him. Okay? Insurrection is, you're a king? We'll put you down. We'll crucify you as we crucified hundreds of you before. I mean, Gamaliel talks about it. He talks about all the other rebels or would-be messiahs they tried to raise up and lead some type of movement against Rome. That all the Jews were expecting a Messiah who can overthrow Rome. With Jesus, it was weird. It was different. What did he say? My kingdom is not of this world. The kingdom is of heaven. He knew what was going on. Why do you think he would tell his disciples? When some sign or some miracle was done, he would say, go and tell no one what happened here. Because he knew that if too much word got out and there was a large following, he says, and he hid himself away because they tried to force him and make him Messiah by force. as if he was going to take up arms and destroy Rome. This is kind of what everyone was expecting. That's why not even the apostles understood when he said, I'm going to be taken, I'm going to be handed into the hands of the enemies, and they're going to kill me. This is not what they had understood, what was popularly understood about what the Messiah was supposed to do. So yeah, it was a big deal. So now what I want to do, guys, I want to read this passage. It'll take us a little minute. Okay, I want to read this passage from Josephus, which will give us some understanding about the influencers. It's a nice, really nice story. Okay, it will give us some understanding of what is going on. It'll give us a third party. We know about what happened with Paul, the apostles, and the non-believing Jews in Jesus. Now, let's hear from a third party something very similar. This is awesome. This is an awesome story. This is in Josephus, in Antiquities. It's a story of Monobazus, the king of Adi Aben. Okay, it says like this. All right, let me get there. 1 second, guys. All right, here we go. It says, the first century Jewish historian tells a story that took place in the kingdom of Adi Aben shortly after the resurrection of Jesus. Some distance from Antioch or Galatia, straddling the highlands of what is today the Kurdish areas of Iraq, Armenia, and northern Iran, sat the kingdom of Adi Aben, with its capital at Arbela. Adi Aben was part of the Assyrian province of the Parthian Empire. Monobazus, the king of Adi Aben, had many wives and many sons, but he loved his wife Helena the most. To her first son, he gave the royal name Monobazus, making him the heir apparent. Helena conceived again. It is said that once while she was pregnant with her second son, Monobazus slept beside her with his hands on her stomach. A voice spoke to him in a dream, telling him to remove his hands and to protect the child, for this one was chosen by God. Monobazus was a Zoroastrian. The voice so frightened him that he woke his wife Helena and told her what he had heard. When the son was born, he named him Izates, like Jacob with his son Joseph. Monobazus placed all of his affection on Izates, to the point that the other brothers hated the boy. For the protection of the young man, the king sent him away to be tutored and raised in the foreign court of King Abianereg of Harax Spasini. King Abianereg welcomed the young man into his court and even gave him the hand of one of his daughters in marriage. While Izates sojourned in the court of Harax Spasini, some of the wives of King Abianereg encountered a certain Jew by the name of Hananiah. This happened around the time of the persecution that broke out in connection with the martyrdom of Stephen in Acts 8. Hananiah the Jew was a tradesman, perhaps selling his wares among the royalty and the women of the court. Under his influence, the women became converts to Judaism and professed faith in the God of Israel. Conversion of Izates. The wives of Abianereg introduced their new son-in-law, Izates, to Hananiah, who in turn introduced the young prince to the God of Israel. Izates came to believe in the one God. The conversion of Izates took place sometime between 30 and 36 Common Era, and it may have preceded that of Cornelius the centurion in Acts 10. When Izates did convert, he wanted to undergo circumcision as a sign of his conversion, but Hananiah discouraged him from doing so. Sounds familiar? Listen, telling him that he could still worship God without being circumcised, even though he resolved to follow the Jewish Torah entirely. Hananiah went on to say that keeping the commandments of the Torah was superior to circumcision. The fearers. Some years later, the Apostle Paul used the same argument with the Gentile converts in his congregations. In the story of Izates, however, Hananiah the Jew gave the same ruling 10 years before Paul did. It may be that the particular brand of Judaism to which Izates originally converted was that of the believers, the disciples of Yeshua, but one cannot be dogmatic on that point. More likely, the type of advice Hananiah gave to Izates was common in first century Judaism, and Paul drew his own theology from that common Jewish posture towards Gentiles. As at any rate, Izates became a follower of the God of Israel, but not Jewish, not a proselyte either. He became what is known a God-fearer. Today, we would know that as a Noahide, or according to Torah terms, a Ger Toshav, which is a resident alien. He was not Jewish. A Jewish Ger is a Ger Tzedek. He's a full convert. A Ger Toshav is a resident foreigner, a resident alien, whatever. In the Persian language today, the word for Christian translates literally as fear. Jewish scholar Shlomo Pines, maybe you guys have heard of him, points out that in at least 3 Iranian languages, Pahlavi, New Persian, and Sogdian, the name for Christian is derived from the Iranian root tars, which means to fear. Christians are called Tarsakin, fears, even to this very day. These languages possess no other names for Christians except loan words borrowed from other languages. Izates became a fear. His ascent to the throne. King Manobazus was near death. This is his father, Izates' father. He desired to see his son again. He sent for Izates and bestowed upon him rulership of the court of the country of Karea, Armenia, in eastern Turkey, a land that produced amomum, a popular spice, and in addition, a land famous among Jews as the resting place for Noah's Ark. Mount Ararat stood in Karea, upon which, according to the first century Jewish historian Josephus, the remains of the ark could still be seen on the mountain by anyone who desired to see them. Izates relocated then to Karea, the land of Noah's Ark, and there he remained until his father's death. When Manobazus died, his wife Helena sent word to her son in Karea. Then she went immediately to work securing the throne for him. She summoned all the political officers and told them how her husband Manobazus had wanted Izates to receive the throne. She said, "I believe you are aware that my husband wanted Izates to succeed in the government and thought him worthy of the position. However, I await your decision, for happy is he who receives a kingdom, not from a single person only, but from the willing consent of the majority." And with such entreaties, she secured their loyalty. When he went to take his throne, Izates brought Hananiah, the rabbi, the Jew, with him to Adia Ben. If he hoped that Hananiah might influence his mother to accept Judaism, he was too late. In his absence, his mother Helena had already embraced the religion of the Jews. It's called divine providence, my friends. What a surprise. Izates took this as a sign from heaven, and he immediately sought full conversion to become Jewish. In the words of Josephus, Josephus says like this: when he realized that his mother approved of the Jewish practices, he was eager to convert and to embrace them entirely. He supposed that he could not be completely Jewish until he underwent circumcision. Therefore, he was ready to have it done. When his mother realized that what he was about to do, she tried to dissuade him from doing it. She told him that this thing would put him in political danger, and that when his subjects came to realize that he, their king, was so fond of rites that were to them strange and foreign, they would find him odious. They would never submit to be ruled over by Jews. End quote. This is in Antiquities of the Jews, 2039. Hananiah the Jew agreed with Queen Helena. This is similar to Abraham agreeing with his father-in-law. What's his father-in-law? Jethro. Okay? So it says, he confirmed her words and comforted Izates, telling him that God would certainly forgive the omission of circumcision, since it literally constituted a danger to his life. So that's actually part of Torah law, Pekut Nefesh. You shall live by the Torah, not die by it. Izates consented to forgo conversion and simply live as a God-fearer, a righteous Gentile who believed in the God of Israel. Now enter in Eliezer the influencer. Sometime later, however, a certain Galilean Jew named Eliezer arrived in Adia Ben. He was a sage and a Torah scholar, and King Izates sought his teaching. He wanted to learn more. When Eliezer entered the palace, he found Izates seated, reading the Torah of Moses. Eliezer had some sharp words for the uncircumcised king. He said to him, this is also in Antiquities of the Jews, have you never considered, O king, that you unjustly violate the rule of those laws you are studying, and you are insulting to God himself by omitting to be circumcised? For you ought not only to study the commandments, but primarily you ought to do what they tell you to do. How long will you continue to be uncircumcised? But if you have not yet read the law about circumcision, and if you are unaware of how great an impiety you are guilty of neglecting it, read it now. Eliezer the Jew told Izates the king. The king sent immediately for a surgeon. After circumcision, Izates and Helena completed their former conversion to Judaism at Eliezer's behest and under his supervision. God protected and prospered Izates and strengthened him in his kingdom. Both he and Queen Helena became prominent characters in rabbinic lore from the end of the Second Temple era, and you can hear all about them in the Talmud. The story provides an insightful glimpse into the first century and illustrates the issues underlying Paul's ministry to the Gentiles. It seems that influencers like Eliezer of Galilee often followed Paul and refuted his teaching that the new Gentile converts need not undergo the ritual conversion of circumcision, because that's what Paul taught. So I wanted to read this last part. It says, pleasing to men of God. Like Eliezer the Galilean and Adiaben, the influencers of Galatia wanted the God-fearing Gentiles to complete a legal conversion to become Jewish. They represented the position held by most other Jewish believers. Jacob, Peter, all of them. And the vast majority of the Yeshua movement, many thousands among the Jews of those who believed, all zealous for the Torah, Acts 21:20. Paul's Gentiles were something of an aberration and an otherwise primarily Jewish sect. The majority opinion among Jewish believers seems to have been that the Gentiles needed to convert sooner or later. So we've already gone over everything else. You know the situation. This story paints a beautiful picture of a third party, of things that Paul was going against. Okay. One rabbi is telling him, hey, I mean, it's okay, man. You know, we understand the situation you are. Okay, it's pretty dire. You can just continue worshiping the God of Israel and you know, keep his commandments. You don't have to be circumcised. You know, you can still have this relationship with God. You'll be okay. But here comes another rabbi, teaches him something different. You know, he didn't care if his life would have been in peril or what it would have constituted his empire. Hey, listen, this is not okay. If you want to continue doing what you're doing, you need to be circumcised, i.e., you need to become Jewish, fully Jewish. So, I mean, when I first heard this story, I was like, man, this is amazing. This is a very, very early story. Puts it in the same time period, and it's like almost identical of what was going on. Anybody got any comments on this portion? None?
Well, it's
Okay.
amazing that Hashem, the way his divine providence now that, you know, people are not getting ritually circumcised, but in the hospitals, they're circumcising the baby. So there's a divine providence right there, and they don't even know it, right?
Yeah, man. So that's amazing, right? That's a great point. All of my kids were circumcised for free. Right? They might, well, not for free. I had to pay some money. Back in my day, they still did it for free. They would ask the parents, hey, you want your kid circumcised? Yeah, boom, and they would circumcise them. All three of my sons, they asked us, and all three of them were circumcised. I didn't do it with any understanding of, like, you know, this is what the Torah demands or anything like that. It was just something that we did. But it is interesting that a lot of people are, you know, whether Gentile or not, they are circumcised. Is pretty interesting.
Hey, Ray.
That definitely comes from the Jewish people.
Hey, Ray. My son's 21, and I'm gonna send him back. I'm gonna send him.
No.
Yo, my brother did it older, man. I can't believe he did that. That's tough.
Okay, next slide.
All right. So here now I wanted to share a couple sources with you guys, man, that should strengthen us, okay? The purpose I have here, okay? The purpose and the will of God is for both Jews and non-Jews, guys. Okay, this is something that we know today for a fact, okay? Judaism, the Torah has a natural development, guys. Okay, there's a natural development built into the Torah. This is one of the reasons why the Masorah was never meant to be codified, because it was supposed to stay fluent and alive in every generation so it can move freely. This is why it was never meant to be codified. It was codified only in order to preserve the Jews, keep them away from assimilation, because they knew it was going to be a bad deal. All of it is part of divine providence, but there's been a lot of development. Okay, there's a lot. A lot of people always say, well, are you going to tell me that all of these writings that there are now from the rabbis, that goes all the way back to the oral Torah? It's not quite like that. There is a base that goes all the way back to First Temple and even all the way back to Moses. But there's a natural development that's also inspired by God, because it's alive in the rabbis and in the community of each generation. Okay, so these people are all connected with Sinai. All the rabbis from our time, rabbis of past generation, they're all connected with Mount Sinai and the Masorah. So listen to what some of these rabbis, I have mostly some passages here from the Be'el HaSulam. He's a great Kabbalist. Listen to what he says. He says, the purpose of creation. Okay, the purpose of creation. Okay, so the purpose that why God created the world. He says, applies to the entire human race, none absent. That means to Jews and to non-Jews. Okay? He further says like this. He says, the purpose of creation lies upon the shoulders of the whole human race, black, white, or yellow, without any essential difference. Sounds like someone we know. Okay? Another slide. Says like this, the purpose of creation is not necessarily for a select group. Rather, the purpose of creation belongs to all creations, Jew and Gentile, without exception. It is not necessarily the strong, the skillful, or the brave people who can overcome. Rather, it belongs to all the creatures. Okay, this is Rabash in his social writings. Now check this one out. All the people in the world will connect and be qualified for his work. His work, who's his? The creator, God. And the last slide is one of my favorite quotes. Okay, it's from Tena Dive Eliyahu Robah 9:1. It says like this, I call the heavens and the earth to testify for me, be it an Israelite or a Gentile, whether a man or a woman, whether a bondsman or a bondswoman. Everything is according to the deeds which the person does. So the Holy Spirit dwells upon them. Amazing source. The Rambam has a very almost an identical source like that too. He says the same thing. And then I wanted to connect that with something in Acts. It says, and the believers from among the circumcised, these are from Jews, who had come with Peter, were amazed, because the gift of the Holy Spirit was poured out on even the Gentiles. Okay, these are just words of encouragement, words of strengthening for us. Okay, we have a lot of reasons. I think the majority of people who are in this Zoom more than likely are non-Jews. And I'll tell you some amazing things. I used to say this all the time. I used to go to like Zoom meetings of Rabbi Alon Anava, or Rabbi, you guys, he's not a rabbi, but Rav Dror, they call him Rav Dror. You guys heard of him? From Breslov. He's got the real long pales and the real long beard. Very, very likable guy. It's really cool. He's actually tall. I met him here in Miami. I'm 6'5", and he was like right there with me. Yeah, he's really tall. And cool people, man. And I remember I used to say this. I used to be like, I bet you that he probably is aware, they're probably all aware, that the majority of followers of this rabbi today, okay, be it the popular ones, Rav Dror, Rav Alon Anava. There's others that are very popular, especially among social media and stuff. The majority of his followers are non-Jews, guys, non-Jews. Now, here's the really funny thing. Not only are they non-Jews, they're also believers in Jesus. The vast majority of them. Not only are they believers in Yeshua, either they were believers in Yeshua or used to be believers in Yeshua, but they're all connected in some way with Yeshua, and they are the majority followers. We're in the times, guys, that all the prophets spoke about. We're in those times. We're living in those times today. And whether someone truly wants to convert today, they can do it. It just should never be because you think you're not good enough. That should never be the question for no one. Everywhere. I mean, we don't really need the New Testament. It's in all the writings of the sages. If you're righteous and you believe in God, I think somebody asked me this week, do you have to go before a Jewish court in order to accept the Noahide code upon yourself to be, counted as one of the righteous of the nations? No, the rabbis themselves say you don't have to do this. It is between you and God. He knows the hearts, he knows the minds, right? But what I also said is that it is only a nice, natural progress that you should do so if you can. Why? Jesus says something like this to his disciples. Whatever you bind in heaven, or whatever you bind on earth is also bound in heaven. That goes along with how the Sanhedrin runs. Whatever the Sanhedrin binds, it's also bound in heaven. Okay? So the Sanhedrin in the physical realm is a depiction of the court in heaven. Okay? So like it is a nice, call it whatever you want, a nice gesture, a nice holy ritual. If you went before a Jewish court and, presented yourself, accepted the code, accepted the Torah, in front of a Jewish court of 3 rabbis or 3 judges. I've done it. There's been a lot of people who've done it. More people are doing it. You don't have to do it. I was told this specifically before I ever underwent it. Went before the court. But it is, we're living in awesome times. I think that whenever the Messiah comes, whoever he may be, right? If you believe he's Yeshua, that's cool. That's cool too. I think these things will happen. There would be like what we're doing on Zoom right now. The Messiah would lead one of these. Everybody will be on TV and listening up. All the nations will come and they will hear the word of God from Jerusalem. So yeah, man, let's open this up. Any questions or any kind of comments that we may have?
Don't be shy, Kira.
There was a lot we heard today.
It was.
How'd you guys like that story from Manu Bazus and his son Izatis? That was nice, huh?
Mm-hmm.
You guys ever heard that before?
I never have, no.
No.
That was good.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say, like, going back to that story and what we were talking about. I was just thinking, like, because Abraham was called out, and he was the first Jew, so he made a covenant with the Lord at that time, and everything before that, there was the covenant where we're talking about of Noahide for Noah. So it seems like if somebody was wanting to convert, I guess that's something that you just want to take on. You want to partake in that covenant. You can still remain in the Noah covenant, but if you are wanting to join or convert, that's just you're just kind of adding on to or going up another level. So I guess this is a personal choice for somebody, but either way, you're still in a covenant with the Lord, whether you're in the Abrahamic covenant or Noah covenant.
Definitely. I mean, Paul mentions that, and the rabbis, we said it last week, the rabbis explain the various sources on this, that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were, for all intensive purposes, they were themselves Noahites. Because there was no actual Jew yet. There was no actual Jewish people yet. What is taught as well is that the moment Abraham accepted circumcision, this made him the first Jew. Okay?
Right.
So it's a specific covenant with him and his descendants, Isaac, Jacob, who became Israel, and he had his 12 sons. Okay? So, yes. So this is the neat thing. What happened was, during the times of Adam, all the way to Noah, the Masorah, the holy tradition of God, as it was passed on from Adam through a righteous line, as it got to Noah, was an oral tradition. Okay? But as the generations you saw dwindled during the times of Genesis 6, there was a large majority who had lost his way very quickly. Okay? People had lost their ways, started believing weird things. A lot of weird things were happening during those times. We don't have time for that now, but they might have had some understandings of the Creator, whatever. But things became corrupt pretty fast. The righteous line kept the truth. They kept the truth of the Creator. They kept a holy tradition and passed it on. The bearers of that tradition was Noah, his sons, and their wives. Okay? There were even some righteous people who perished in the flood or died before the flood. Okay? But only the people who were going to be the bearers of this knowledge was Noah and his family. Noah met and knew Abraham. Abraham studied and learned of these holy traditions of the Creator at the first school of God called the Beit Midrash of Shem and Eber. Shem and one of Noah's grandchildren. Okay, this was like the first school of learning about the will of God, because they were the bearers of that light to that moment. It was later passed on to Abraham. So that tradition, stemming all the way back to Adam, Adam knew Noah and passed on through his children, passed on that godly wisdom and tradition to Noah. Noah, in turn, passed it on to Abraham, and on and on and on and on. You see, it's all connected. When Abraham, through his children, Jacob, and then passed on through their children to Moses, they get to Mount Sinai. The entire world had forgotten about the Noahide code. They didn't know what those obligations were. They had no idea what that tradition was. It was forgotten. It was only passed on through this righteous line. That's why it is taught today, to this very day. What do the rabbis teach about Noahide laws? You cannot say, hey, I keep the Noahide laws. I've never gone to no rabbi and learned it. I knew that this is it. Don't kill nobody. Don't steal from nobody. Don't commit blasphemy. I mean, all this is pretty much kind of like moral law. You know, I kind of understand these things. That's all I need to do. They say, if you do this, and if you know it from this manner, because it kind of seems kind of simple and you know it this way, you're not a righteous, kosher Noahide. You're part something called the wise among the nations. But
That's
you're
good,
not a kosher, righteous Noahide.
That's good, buddy. I think we have a couple questions here. I think, Kira, did you have one?
No.
No.
I'm just
Anita, I saw you opened up. Did you want to ask one?
No, I don't have a question right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
So let me
Oh,
finish
I
this
do
thought.
have
So, huh?
I did want to ask one
Go
question.
ahead. Hit me.
So back, I guess I'll just say the Old Testament, when people
Yes.
decided to join with the children of Israel, like from other nations, like that, maybe from conquered nations or just from anywhere, any immigrants that came, did all of them usually, I won't say all of them, but did a lot of them convert, or did they just join them and, I know like forsaking their gods, or what was there a process back then as well? You don't know what I'm
Great
trying to
question.
say.
Yeah,
My
great
brain's
question.
off
So
right now.
the majority of people, what happened was, for example, let's say Israel conquered like some small tribe or whatever.
Mhm.
The only option was if they conquered you, right? And you, for some reason, I mean, you became their slaves, and then you saw that these people were righteous people, they were good people. The majority of people probably converted. They would get circumcised and they integrated into the larger Jewish community, right? Their children would be known as Jews, etc. But there is a concept, and we've mentioned it, the concept, and it's in the Torah, it's actually in the written Bible, of the ger toshav, which is a resident alien or a foreigner among you. And in the Bible, in the Torah, it says, to treat the foreigner among you with respect. You got to treat them with, they have certain rules that they have to abide. So if you're going to come into our nation, you're going to come into the nation of Israel, and you're going to, you're going to have our security, you're going to take a place, you're going to work among us. You had to keep some norms. The norms are what we have come to know as the Noahide laws. The rabbis speak about this. This is just a name that was given to those norms, whatever they may have been called in those times. The rights of the foreigner among you, the rights of the Ger Toshav, whatever. Today we know those rights as the Noahide code. And it was basically revolved around idolatry. You cannot worship any other God among us. The Jews have always been against assimilation. It's in the Torah. Don't intermingle with the nations, because they're going to draw you after their gods. They're going to draw you after their ways. You are a separate people. Stay separate. This is the way they were able to stay uncontaminated by the paganism and idolatry surrounding them. So these people had a choice. Integrate, became Jewish, or you became one of these foreigners that kept these norms. And they were like some type of quasi-convert. I've heard it called from among scholars, a very ancient way the Ger Toshav was called was a half convert. He's like a half convert. He believed in the one true God. There was some portion of kashrut that he kept. You couldn't have the same ways as the nations would sacrifice their animals. You didn't have to be fully kosher, but you ate a certain ways. And for the majority, they kept a lot of the customs and rules just like the Jews, but they just didn't circumcise. They weren't Jewish themselves. So they didn't have all the benefits, etc., whatever. But they were integrated, and they had their place, and they were supported. The community would support them if there was a need or whatever. Today and age, that concept is still not in force. Okay, there's something like a Ger Toshav, but that concept itself is a great big debate amongst the Jewish community, because in order for the Ger Toshav to be fully integrated, the Torah has to be reigning in Israel, and it's not the rule force right now. Israel is not like a theocracy at the moment. The rule of law is not the Torah. So the moment the Yovel and all these different things are back in action, they will reinstate that concept. It doesn't go out of existence. That's why I say there is something like a Ger Toshav today, but it's not in full force. And what is meant is, the main reason why it's not in full force is that the Jewish community has no way how it could actually support a Gentile living among them right now, and giving them like all different type of rights in that way. And besides, the Israel right now it's a secular state. It doesn't rule by Torah. But to answer your question, those were the ways. They either were a Ger Toshav or became fully Jewish, which was the majority. That was the majority way how everybody did it.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Any last questions before we close this lesson down tonight, which has given me a lot to think about, and I have the notes right here. So that's great job, Ray. Great job.
man. It's a lot, guys. And the main things that we wanted to point out today is just kind of giving you guys an insight to these influencers and kind of like what's going on here with Paul. Who are these people? If you don't understand who are his audience, okay, who is he talking to, and what is the main objection of Paul? Is against these influencers who are telling his Gentile, his followers, the people who he's teaching, that he's telling them, hey man, you're okay. The Messianic era is coming. God accepts you as a non-Jew. All you have to do is keep your obligations to him. Keep your obligations to the God of Israel. You follow his Messiah. You follow his king. You're good to go. And other ones are coming in and be like, yo, that's not enough. We don't care if you just believe in Jesus. That's not enough. You got to get circumcised, meaning you got to become fully Jewish, buddy.
Well
This
said,
is the main thrust of Galatians. Or you cannot understand none of his letters.
very good. Very good.
Yeah, thanks, Ray.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks,
sir.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. I just appreciate you guys.
Hey, no, man, we're glad you're here tonight. We're
Yeah,
glad
man.
glad all of you guys could make it back tonight. And you stick around for about a minute after I stop this recording, you'll get something that those people out there in the rest of La La Land that just did not participate are going to hear a amazing secret about Ray Luke that nobody else in the world knows. So, but anyway, great job, Ray, for lesson 2. Everybody, thank you very much for coming back. We'll do this again next Saturday, Hashem willing. And blessings to all of you. Blessings to you, Ray, for the work you do all week to prepare for this. And I appreciate you, brother. And I hate that you're 6'5" and I'm 5'9" going the other way. Okay. So on that note, we're going to close it out. You guys have a great one. Take care and blessings.